Thanks, guys. So this is, this truly is a love story. I picked up a camera in 2011, 2012, really just to document these places that I was coming across that were wonderful and beautiful and inspiring. Before that, I was trying to make a career in music, and that's really hard to do, especially in Maine, and I didn't want to give up on being a Mainer and move to a big city to pursue music. So as I let that dream die, I kind of picked up this new hobby, kind of randomly, but the idea of putting four corners around the beauty I was coming across and the things I was seeing on nature walks, which are already a big part of my life, was really, really satisfying. And not only being out in the field and making images, but then bringing them back, editing them on a computer, and then sharing them on the internet. In those days, Facebook was a fun place to be, believe it or not, in 2011, 2012. That was the days before ads, before the algorithm, when you only saw posts from friends in sequential order. So there was this really neat community of giving and taking and sharing with like-minded people. So I was really lucky to come up in that time. It wasn't long before photos that I was taking caught the attention of local publications, in this case, The Forecaster. One of my first publications was this clamor coming in at Strawberry Creek in Harpswell. And I was always amazed that I could make a photo and people would react so much as to either like or comment on social media, or a photo editor would want to use the image in a magazine. To me, this was amazing because I wasn't seeking this attention or trying to make a career out of it, but it quickly became obvious to me that this was something that I could do for the rest of my life and be really, really happy. So I got super into all aspects of photography, but at its core, it's really about following my curiosity. A big curiosity for me from a very young age is the weather. And I like to be out there. I would be out there without a camera before photography. I was famously with my mom, she would say, "You need to come inside," and I was always outside in the weather or at the window watching it instead of seeking shelter, as you might want to when there's a thunderstorm coming your way or a winter storm. Or in my case, growing up in Mississippi, we had tornadoes and hurricanes, and I always wanted to be out in it. So that love continued when I got into photography. In this case is a lightning bolt at Lookout Point in Harpswell. And I promise I was being very safe. I was in the trunk of my car with the hatchback up, tripod, taking one frame after the other. And I was about ready to pack up and go home because I'd already captured a couple of bolts before this one, but I thought, I'm going to just stay for one more. And that one more became this amazing, one of the coolest things I've ever seen, this lightning bolt coming down right between two islands. Beautiful structure. And then I was like, all right, I got it. I'm out of here. I love winter. We'll talk more about that later. I think it's the most beautiful season. We're really lucky to have winter. And I think we all felt this winter a little bit of fear of that maybe going away and winter's not being as wintry. So hopefully I can continue to document that. This is actually not even during a winter storm, but during a king tide on the Rockland breakwater. This was one of the highest king tides of the century. I think they said this was the highest it had been in 70 years. So without large waves coming in, it was cool to see these kind of small breakers coming over the breakwater and this misty fog obscuring what you guys know is an otherwise kind of distracting background with houses and the Owl's Head Peninsula behind it. This is at Owl's Head Harbor, and this is one of my favorite times to stand outside is when it's snowing super duper heavily. And you can just feel the weight of the snow in the air, the heaviness, and it also for photography reasons, does a really nice thing of obscuring the background and giving a great sense of depth when you make an image in these conditions. Out on Monhegan Island just last September, we were out for Hurricane Lee. And I don't know if you guys remember that sunset we had, I think it was the night before the hurricane came in, one of the most spectacular sunsets I've ever seen. And we were out there with a workshop group, and I revisited this composition that I'd photographed before, but I just knew with the light in the sky that we had then, it could be something really special, and it was. So being out before and after storms is a really good time to capture images. This is after a thunderstorm had passed from Willard Beach in South Portland, looking at Cape Elizabeth. And sadly, those shacks were both lost in the big storms this year. But wonderful conditions after the storm where the departing clouds are being lit by the setting sun, and the rain that had fallen created this layer of cool air over the water. And then as the storm departed, condensation occurred, and we got this nice fog and mist over the water. That was just beautiful. Sometimes when there's no weather, there's a great chance to capture something special. In this case, the Milky Way at night. And I was out at 2 to 3 a.m. to get this in May, when the Milky Way lines up right behind the Rockland Breakwater. An important thing to note is that I do not composite things into images that weren't there. I like to capture things the way I see them and the way that they really are, because that's part of the fun of photography for me. I mean, the whole joy for me is to be out there and be experiencing it. The photos are kind of an added bonus. The real wonder is to be out in the field when these amazing things are happening. And if I happen to capture something to share, that's great. Another amazing moment on Monhegan. This was during a different sunset a few years previously, where I wanted to capture all of the drama going on in the sky. So I stood pretty far back from the lighthouse, and I moved until the sun got right behind the bell that's placed on the lawn there. So I positioned the sun behind the bell, and then I did a panorama with my camera moving all the way around the frame. It's a pretty wide angle standing there. Another panorama, this at McLuhan's down on Sprucehead Island, pretty close to here. And I love the way the red stood out against the white snow, and then this beautiful aquamarine color in the water really came out. You can see the snowflakes falling. Another thing that drives me, it's related to weather, is natural wonder in all of its forms. I'd come out to Reed State Park, in this case to photograph the Milky Way. I had no idea that I would encounter bioluminescence in the water that night. But as I set up the camera and started taking photos, I noticed what looked like starlight reflections in the water around me. I'm like, that's interesting. And then when I looked on the back of my LCD, I noticed that these starlight reflections had a very strong blue cast. So the camera picks up the color that the eye can't see with a very long exposure. Same if you're photographing northern lights, or that's a well-known phenomenon that the camera actually can see better than the human eye can. In this case, this was a 30-second exposure, and in those 30 seconds, thousands of these little creatures emitted their light in the water, and it really just was amazing to be there in person. And the resulting image is one of my favorites I've ever captured. Here's the northern lights that are much more vibrant in the camera than I saw in person, but I'm in West Bath looking across the New Meadows River, looking north during a display. And we're actually in solar maximum right now, so there should be more opportunities to see northern lights over the next year or so because of solar activity. The moon has always amazed me. One of my favorite stories about the moon is how much as children, my brother and sister and I could have cared less about the moon. Something that my mom always did that actually scared the heck out of us. We'd be driving down the road and she'd go, oh, and we're like, oh my God, what's wrong, Mom? She goes, the moon. And we're like, oh, Mom, not the moon again. Now I kind of get it. I kind of get it. The moon's pretty amazing. In this case, I hadn't expected to capture the moon at all. I'd been photographing the Milky Way the night before and kind of was hanging around for sunrise. And I noticed this looked like a light on the water at first in the distance. I thought maybe it was a passing boat, but it kept growing and growing and finally became noticeable as the moon coming up. So I ran back to my car. I'd had my wide angle lens on for Milky Way photography. I ran back to get my telephoto lens, ran back down the beach, and by the time I got back, it was pretty high in the sky, and the sun was coming up behind it, so you had this nice red glow below it. And just really simple composition with this peninsula across the water, sloping down into the ocean, and made for a really simple photo, but one of my favorites. Same place, Popham Beach during sunset. This island is unreachable from the state park now. The only way to reach the island is to go to Morse Mountain further down the road and then walk about 4 extra miles to get here. So the beach changes every year and the Morse River naturally changes course. But this is the first time since I've been here that I've seen it not accessible from the state park. Lots of changes. This is Reed State Park. And I just love the way the wave was backlit, creating this green, beautiful glow. And the sand there is really unique. It's a really dark, rusty colored sand. That's really special. One of my favorite images of the last few years is not one of the traditional landscapes that I'm used to photographing, but instead this view of the alewife run from Damerscottam Mills, looking straight down from the bridge. And I'd had the idea for this a couple of years before when I was there photographing, and I'd photographed the guys harvesting the alewives and a lot of the activity around it, and then some of the osprey hitting the water, catching the alewives is really a fascinating thing to photograph. But I wanted to capture just the idea of the alewives moving through the water, and I'd done a few at an angle, but not until I got up on the bridge and looked straight down where there were no light coming in, no reflections. I used a circular polarizing filter, in fact, to cut the reflections even more. Just looking straight down with this massive fish going past me was able to kind of fulfill my vision of telling the story of this migration. And I named the piece Liquid Migration because of that. Natural wonder. And that's me, how I really feel when I'm out there seeing these things. That's, of course, on Mount Batty in Camden. And I chased that rainbow down to this point, further down the mountain, because I wanted to have the rainbow coming right down into the town and into the harbor. Standing up in the parking lot, it was kind of skewed off to the side. I'm like, nope, I gotta get to where the rainbow's going right down for that pot of gold effect. And when I got there, I took this photo. This is a photo I don't think I've shared online ever, but the comet Neowise a couple of years ago, I actually came over here to Beach Nut on Beach Hill and saw it, and some other people had the same idea, so I included them in the frame with the Beach Nut house, and just really shows the wonder of witnessing a comet, and that was a really special one, really beautiful. So in addition to natural wonder and weather, I'm absolutely fascinated with history and our coastal culture. I think this falls a little bit more under the natural wonder side of thing, but this was the moonlight reflecting at Popham Beach. And you can kind of get a feel for the culture with the old life-saving station there and the group of people sitting around a fire on the beach. There's some coastal culture. The mural down here in Rockland, I put this in for you guys since we're here. I love this mural and this guy just chilling out. I think he has a stack of records actually or something, looking at his phone. and here's the fusion of the two, the natural wonder of the moon, and then this civil engineering landmark, the Cribstone Bridge connecting Orrs and Bailey Island. This is a, World Heritage Landmark or whatever, civil engineering landmark. And it is fascinating that they built this bridge using these cribstones, and the idea is so that the tide can move freely through it. There's Homer. Homer's down in Port Clyde, and I don't take many photos of people, but this guy I've known for many years, and the first time I went down there, I was with a group of people, and he goes, hey, you guys, come on over. He invited us in to his fishing shack, which is, of course, the most photogenic shack on the harbor, filled with all kinds of knickknacks, and, as you can see, Christmas lights there, and he's hung all kinds of buoys and random things on it. And he's just this really warm, kind, wonderful man. And he always loves talking to me when I'm down there, and I'm usually with a group of photographers. So one time we were there and he was talking to everybody. I'm just like, I'm gonna take his photo, and I finally did it. And I'm so glad that I did, because it became one of my favorite photos I've taken. Another great Camden experience, if you guys haven't done this, is to view the fireworks, not from the harbor, where a lot of people like to go, but getting up, I wasn't even at the parking lot, but halfway up Mount Batty, there's a really nice viewpoint, actually where I photographed the rainbow from, and you can see the fireworks over the harbor, which are really nice, but you can also see fireworks on Vinyl Haven, on Monhegan, probably up the coast in Lincolnville Beach, and just all around you on the 4th of July, there are these fireworks displays going on. And another good thing is that they do the fireworks a little earlier in the evening so that you can photograph them during the blue hour, where you have still some illumination from the leftover light of day on the landscape instead of it being pitch black dark. I love this boat. It's sadly out of the water now. I think the owner's daughter, I was able to gift her a print of this, but there's a pink flamingo tied to the top of it, and it's called the Dithy Doo. And the pink in the boat was mirrored in the pink in the sky and on the water really nicely for this sunset. This is why I took the photo. Part of our coastal culture that fascinates me, and one that feels very precarious right now, is lobstering. And there's so many wonderful lobster harbors in Maine. You guys are familiar. This is Lookout Point in Harpswell. It's back down at Port Clyde. The thing I really loved about this image is every single line in this image is leading your eye into the center of the frame. From the slats in the foreground boards, to the ripples in the water, to even the curving arc of the cloud formation in the sky. Everything in this image leads your eye right into the center of the frame. This makes it a very engaging image. This is Mackerel Cove in Harpswell on Bailey Island. Beautiful spot. And that pillar out there is not a lighthouse, but a nautical marker called Mark Island. This is Owl's Head Harbor. Owl's Head Harbor is one of the best places to see sea smoke in Maine. The water is relatively warmer there, and any difference in warmth in the water and really cold air in the sky really accentuates the steam coming off the water, which is caused by the temperature difference. This is back down in Port Clyde, the Red October. Red on white, can't go wrong with that combination. This is pulled back. This is actually the same spot as the previous photo, but pulled back and including some of the docks and skiffs in the foreground. Same island though. This is a New Harbor, and this was one of the best lighting scenarios I've ever seen, where lights hitting the boats and the boathouse, but the background is in complete shadow. There's a couple of highlights in the trees where a little bit of filtered light's coming through, but I love that really dark background I got looking across the harbor at sunrise. This is in Tennett's Harbor. We caught a guy out painting his buoys when I had a workshop one time. And of course, we had to go bother him and ask to take his photo. Sometimes just piles of buoys and ropes make a great image. Sometimes dead fish. It all tells a story. All right, lighthouses. Why do I love lighthouses so much? Well, it's not because they're the most popular subject to take a photograph of in Maine. It's because they're placed in the most beautiful spots in Maine, easily. They get the extremes of light and weather because of the low horizon in one or more directions, the exposure to the elements. I think the fact that they're painted white, or in this case red and white, immediately draws your eye, makes them a great subject because your eye always goes to the brightest object in the frame. And I love the symbolism and the metaphor. It's human kindness. It's humans caring for each other. They're placed to keep sailors off the rocks, to warn them away in a storm. So they represent security, resilience, and safety. And there's so many interesting ways of seeing them. I don't know if you can tell here, but I was going through a big Edward Hopper phase of looking at a lot of Edward Hopper art and kind of absorbing the way he saw things. It's down at Marshall Point. On this occasion, I'd come to Owl's Head to photograph the sunrise. And I was going to photograph the lighthouse, but Bob Trapani and his son Dominic were there. They said, "Do you want to come up into the lighthouse?" Yeah, definitely. And we went up there, and the panes were just frosted, and the first rays of sunlight were hitting. And I thought, how can I make a unique photograph here that tells a story? So I got in really, really close to the Fresnel, which is this lens, ancient lens that is used to magnify the light. And I just included the lens, which looks like an eye in this case, and have that horizontal symmetry. So I had splitting the horizon right down the middle, and then the lens is, half and half on either side. Made for a cool photo. This wasn't during this year's bad storms, but this was December 23rd, 2022. Another unbelievable storm that had the biggest waves I've ever seen. And this wave actually did some major damage at Portland Head Light. And I was able to confirm that because I was taking what's called a burst of frames. So one frame continuously after another, I was able to see that this wave came in, and after it had washed back down, it had knocked out a window, a door, it had knocked this granite pillar holding a bell up off of its frame, and it completely washed out most of the slate walkway in front of the lighthouse. Thank goodness no one was standing there, because there were people standing being, having fun, I guess, being hit by waves before this, which I thought was really stupid. But luckily for this big, big wave that did a lot of damage, no one was hurt, no one was standing there. A little more peaceful shot of Curtis Island. Great opportunity to get the drone up and capture something unique of this little island and lighthouse guarding Camden Harbor. It's another one of the moon photos. A lot of planning does go in to most of these photos. So the first crescent moon photo I showed you wasn't planned, but a lot of these photos where I have the moon coming up right behind the well-known landmark, I've planned ahead of time to know exactly where to stand on the shore, usually anywhere between a half mile to a mile and a half away. In this case, I think the Breakwater Lighthouse is at least 2 miles offshore from Rockland Harbor. So I'm using an app called either Photographer's Ephemeris or Photo Pills to know exactly where I need to stand as the moon comes up. And then I do have to make last minute adjustments to move from side to side as it comes up, because it comes up at an angle. But it's always magical, even if I know where it's coming up. In this case, I had not planned for there to be a sailboat there, but as soon as I saw that sailboat coming around the corner, I was like, oh boy, Here it comes. This is going to be awesome. And changed my position, actually raised the camera up. It had been down low in the lupin to kind of accentuate them and make them more dramatic. But I knew that I wanted to get the sailboat and not have it obscured by the island in any way, and got it right before it went behind the island. Winter. Why winter? Winter is a very unique season. Not everyone gets winter. It's beautiful what it does to the landscape. It simplifies, it obscures what can otherwise be distracting ground or foreground. And it gives you that great sense of depth in the background, especially when it's snowing heavily. You kind of get that fall off of light in contrast. This is in Harpswell, and I wedged my camera into a crevice that was about maybe 4 or 5 inches high. It looks like I'm standing inside of a cave, but just my camera is in this tiny little crevice between, it was actually a bit of an ice chunk that had broken off and was sitting above the rest of the ice. I love these blue hour shots because you get the contrasting light of the town, which is usually this orange fluorescent glow, with the blue in the sky, and that's a really pleasing color combination called analogous colors. Another sea smoke photo. This is the giant stairs on Bailey Island. Only in winter do we see this, though this winter I wasn't out for any sea smoke, and I only saw photos of some very light sea smoke events this year. Very mild winter. What was I doing instead? Most likely I was winter hiking. This has become my obsession over the last few years, especially the last 2. As I look for a new challenge, mostly, but also new opportunities to seek beauty in an unusual and sometimes extreme environment. This is taken from Mount Pierce in the Presidential Range. This was this year on Mount Shakura, or this winter, back in December. And just beautiful sunset light. It does take a lot of effort to reach these locations. I like that part of it. I like the journey of getting there just as much as the image possibilities. One wonderful thing about it for me is that I'm never alone when I do these hikes. I'm always with someone, which not only is great for safety, but just great for camaraderie, company, being with like-minded people, being with really adventurous, fun people. It's been really a real joy to get out for these hikes and get to make some fun images along with those. This was on Mount Katahdin this year and late January, and we had ideal conditions for summit day. No wind. It was about 25 degrees and undercast. So we have clouds below us, the sun coming up, and very, very comfortable conditions for standing on the summit, which is extremely rare. Last year we were up there and it was cloudy, snowy, socked in, and about 60-mile-an-hour winds and probably 10-degree air temperature, which meant the wind chill was about 30 below. So this year was much nicer. And this wasn't a posed photo. This is my friend Grant, when he arrived on the summit, his natural reaction was this: wow. And I snapped the photo as he was raising his arms. I'm like, yep, that sums it up. The previous year, after our grueling summit, we did have clearing the night after we had summited, and I went out on Chimney Pond and was trying to make photos of the stars, and 2 things happened. I noticed that the constellation Orion was coming up behind the ridge, and if I waited, I would have the constellation in the frame completely over the ridge with all the elements visible. And another thing I noticed is that these photos that I was taking of just the stars and the mountain weren't telling the story of what I was feeling. So what did I do? I set up my tripod, set up a timer, had it on continuous burst, one after the other, and walked into the frame myself with my headlamp and looked up. And that told the story of what I was feeling and what the experience was all about, more so than the empty frame or the frame without a person in it. Finding your special places. I think if you're a photographer or not, it's nice to have these places that are full of meaning, full of beautiful experiences. To me, I have many of them. One of them is Monhegan Island, which I keep returning to year after year. I've been going there for about 9 years now, most of my photography career. And every time I'm there, I see new things. Even in this very compact area, the island is 1.5 miles long, 1 mile across. One thing I really love about it is one side is completely rugged, no sign of human habitation whatsoever. These beautiful trails through the woods, and then some of the tallest cliffs on the east coast of the United States and North America. And on the other side, you have a 19th century fishing village. This beautiful little New England fishing village, and at the top of the island, you've got a lighthouse that looks down on it with this beautiful dory parked out front, the Fitzgerald dory. And it's no surprise, artists have been coming here for centuries. But I found when I started going that photographers hadn't been photographing it as much as painters and other artists were capturing it. So I made it definitely my mission to photograph it and to create my own impressions and interpretations. It's down on Fish Beach during sunset, and this is another panorama where I've panned all the way around to include a really wide sweep of the scene. This is from just above Fish Beach looking down, different time of day. Kind of a classic shot with the white linens hanging out. And again, this is like from right down the road. Now I'm looking back up the hill at sunrise in September as the cool morning air interacts with this warm, moist air hanging in over the meadow, which created this fog. And then as the fog's filtered through this apple tree, you get that starburst. After we had the spectacular sunset the night after Hurricane Lee, we were all at dinner in the dining room, not expecting anything to happen when the waitress says, "Guys, I think you're going to have to drop what you're doing and head out there because I see a rainbow starting." So thankfully the waitress warned us. We dropped our dinner, grabbed our cameras, ran outside, and sure enough, there was a rainbow. And I asked one of the guys with me, I said, "All right, do we want to photograph this down on Fish Beach or over the Island Inn?" He goes, "Island Inn." I'm like, "All right, we're going." So that's what we did. We photographed the rainbow over the Island Inn, and it definitely became one of the most amazing shots I've ever gotten out there. Portland Headlights, another one of those places. When people ask me to name, if I could only name one, which I hate that question, if you could only name one place that you could photograph, what would it be? Probably Portland Headlight. Though I begrudgingly would choose that. But why I love it so much is there's so many places to stand, so many angles to catch the incoming light. Always, for me, morning light, though sometimes at the ends of the day or during heavy snow. But it's just a beautiful sunrise location where you can range from the far north side to the top of the lighthouse and then all the way down to the south below the lighthouse, catching all these angles of light coming in. This illustrates that nicely, where the image on the left is from the south side at sunrise, and the image from the right is on the north side, with totally different rock formations and just really interesting geology and erosion there. Fascinating place. I've been there where the rocks were coated in ice to the degree that I could not get my tripod to stand still. Every time I took a photo, it would kind of slide down the ice, even with spikes in it, and I would along with it at times. So I think I took about 200 images to get one sharp one in this case. Coming at night during a winter storm, because I knew that would tell the story of why the lighthouse was there. to warn sailors off the rocks. This was a very beautiful, pleasant morning, and I got really down close to the water and had the waves just kind of cascading off. Five Islands is a place really close to me. Over in Bath, I'm able to get here in about 15 minutes. So it's really great whenever there's weather happening. You guys know I love weather. I get there for all kinds of cool conditions like fog and mist, rainbows, sea smoke, the moon coming up. And that's another one of these places where there's so many different angles and ways to capture it. There's not one iconic shot. And I actually don't like places where I feel like there are tripod holes that someone left there before me, like this is the only shot. I want to make my own interpretation. And for that same reason, I love bringing workshop groups and students to these places so that they can see it through their own eyes and make images that speak to them. Five Islands speaks to me so much. The longer I do this, the more interested I am in photographing some of the people I come across, like Homer in Port Clyde, or in this case, the Pinkhams in Five Islands, these big families of lobstermen. In that case, father and son. On the upper right, the son just bought his first lobster boat, and he's about 2 feet taller now than he was in that photo. So I get to see these guys grow up. That's pretty cool. Capture different moods. I love this blue, kind of misty, mysterious hue with the wake from the boat as the guy's going out. And again, the blue hour light, early in the morning. This guy's coming out, obviously the first one there after the snow had fallen the night before. And then they could care less about the sunrise, but I was like, wow, look at that sunrise behind you guys. They're just chatting it up. So I'm known for these big landscapes and the big weather and the dramatic, and I still love that, but I'm making new bodies of work, and you guys get a sneak preview here, that speak to something a little different, that are much more intimate. They tell different stories. In this case, I'd been traveling to and from Vermont and New Hampshire last fall and the fall before. And on the way there in South Paris, Maine, this dingy little town, there's this roadside convenience store next to a pond. And on the pond, there were a lot of maple trees around it, and it was pretty. But what attracted me were the leaves that had fallen into the pond, because they were floating by in these rafts and these combinations of different colors and even different species of trees. And to me, they represented people. What do? We anthropomorphize everything we look at. But to me, this was telling stories of diversity, of community, of life, birth and death. I know that's not a tree seed. It's one of the fall grasses, but to me, that was a story of birth and death there with the leaf obviously on its way out. Beautiful lighting conditions of light filtering through the trees, highlighting these leaves. And then all these just really interesting combinations. And to get the background black, this isn't studio lighting, but instead, as they floated by on the water, I used a circular polarizing filter. And when you turn that, just like polarized sunglasses, the water rendered as black when I'm exposing for the surface of the leaves. Another project I'm working on that to me speaks to abstract art are the surfaces of lobster buoys. I'm photographing these kind of as I would photograph a painting, and I think of them as paintings, and it's a kind of conspired artwork from both the lobstermen who painted them and time and weather and the effects of weathering. And I think together they just create these beautiful texture studies, color studies that tell a story of time, weathering, the lobstermen who created it. And I find them really, really interesting and amazingly diverse with the different weathering patterns. In this case, these were freshly painted buoys with a passing rainstorm. Really interesting wear pattern. This was down at Owl's Head Harbor. Of course, on Monhegan, someone paints their lobster buoys like this. They're all artists out there, even the lobstermen. And then another series I'm working on are these lobster boat aerials, where I photograph the boats from the same angle, about the same height, and just to show the diversity and interesting texture and color and surfaces of these boats. And I have hundreds and hundreds of images like the ones you just saw of the lobster boats. But then I have a couple of that tell other stories happening in the harbor of, the whole cycle of boat, trap, harvest, and then the pickup truck, the ubiquitous pickup truck. In this case, a group of seagulls taking flight. I came upon pogie harvest last year in Bremen, and that was fascinating. And the only way that I could photograph it was from a drone. I didn't have a boat to get out there, so I got some really interesting images of that. All right, you might know me from Down East Magazine, because I worked for them for 6 years, from 2016 to 2022, and it was a wonderful, wonderful job. I was hired as the photo editor, which means they expected me to source every single image that went into the magazines, the calendars, and all of their custom publications. Not books at the time, but other guidebooks, some other publications we were doing for other entities. And I was happy to do that, but I was not strong enough. It was a massive job. I think I could have done that on its own, but they also wanted me to photograph most of the images that went into every issue. And traditionally, those two jobs have been separate. The photo editor just does sourcing and wasn't a photographer in the past. But in this day and age with shrinking budgets and the reality of publications, I had to take on both roles. I survived in that role for 4 years, and then thankfully they moved me sideways into the staff photographer role so that I could be out photographing more and the office work could be shared with another photographer. So that worked out great. The assignments that I took on were mostly self-assigned. They were just places where I wanted to follow my own curiosity and tell the stories that I was coming across. I did go out on some assignments to photograph sponsored content that weren't self-assigned, but mostly kind of got to make it up as I go. In addition to photographing for Down East, I was on a postage stamp in 2018, which I don't think could have made anyone prouder than my dad. He thought that was really cool. He even thought it was cool when I was on a beer can, which was kind of weird, for Shipyard and the cover of the Maine tourism guide, Maine Invites You. All right, here's what you guys want to know. How did we do this? All right, these are tips for you photographers out there. Photograph in all weather. I hope you've already gotten that from this presentation. Go out when others stay in, because weather can help tell a story, or it can be the story. I mean, in this case, the story is that giant wave hitting the lighthouse. It also is what we have to deal with as outdoor photographers, because it changes light, it changes mood. It kind of is, having the weather knowledge in your back pocket is going to really increase your opportunities and your chances of success by knowing how to respond to it. I do favor the golden hours. So I say get out in all weather. If I had my pick on a sunny day, I'm definitely going to be going out in the morning and the evening and probably avoiding photographing in the middle of the day, even though that's the time when everyone's going, oh, it's a beautiful day, you must be getting great photos. And I'm like, yeah, not really. This light's pretty harsh. So to avoid the harsh shadows of midday light, I'm going out in the early morning and the late evening, because you get the warm hues, the soft light, and the beautiful skies. You only see these colors in the sky at that time of day. That's why I love being out at those times. Learning to use manual mode means getting out of auto mode, which allows you to control light with exposure. You can intentionally underexpose in this case so that you're not blowing out the highlights in the moon, so that it's not just a white orb behind the lighthouse, which it would be. If I was exposing for a middle gray in this image, it would pick up the water in the sky and render that much brighter. And when it renders that brighter, it's going to be overexposing the highlights in the lighthouse and the moon. So it's really important to be able to use manual exposure so I can control the light coming in. I can also control the depth of field, having things sharp front to back or intentionally blurring something. I control shutter speed so that I can blur the waves if I want to, or freeze motion if I have a fast moving object that I want to freeze in place. And that allows me to react to any situation. This is always the toughest thing for beginning photographers, is like, I don't want to use a tripod. And that happens every time on a workshop. If someone is coming in who's fresh, they've just gotten their first camera, and I've told them that they need to have a tripod on the workshop, they buy the cheapest tripod that they can find, some $30 thing they picked up at Walmart, and it is miserable for them to use, and they hate it. They're like, this tripod sucks. I don't know why you guys do this. Well, it needs to be a decent tripod so that you can actually enjoy using it and it's effective as a tripod. So not just any tripod will do. But that allows you to make long exposures. Any twilight image or any night image for sure greatly benefits from a tripod. Though cameras are getting better at high ISO settings, and I find myself using a tripod less and less in marginal situations because the cameras really have gotten much better. And cell phones have too. Your best images will be unique to you. So it seems self-explanatory, but photograph what you know and love. Repeat visits will lead to deeper knowledge and understanding. And by understanding locations in your backyard, keeping it local, you're able to go when the weather's good, when something interesting's happening. Having these, I mean, we're so lucky to be here on the coast of Maine. Having these beautiful locations all around us means that we can get out when a great sunset's happening or when there's a nor'easter and capture something unique, something special, and have fun. And, you know, you connect to your local landscape. You feel like you're a part of it. I love that part. I love this Andrew Wyeth quote. It's about the emotional contact. It's about how you're feeling about what you're photographing that comes through. And it's very, very important to me that I feel very strongly about what I'm photographing because I know that that's going to be communicated in the images I make. Simplifying your composition means eliminating distractions. It means watching what's going on the edges in the corner, making sure you don't have a branch poking in or a piece of rubbish in your foreground or some other distracting element that's going to pull your eye out of the frame. It usually means getting closer to what's in front of you. And I often look for dynamic lines, such as this C curve in this image, to create interest in the photo. So there's this kind of dichotomy in photography, and Henri Cartier-Bresson hits on that here, where you have this, you know, instantaneous recognition of something, but you're also really trying to organize it in your mind and make sense of what can be a very visually overwhelming world, right? The world in front of us is complex and dynamic, and if we were to just point our camera anywhere at any time, usually the images would come out a mess. So it's this organization of forms that express a fact, and we know it. We know it when we see it. That's the best way that we can explain a useful composition is you feel it. You feel the arrangement of elements. It's not about rules. It's not the rule of thirds. It's the intuition. It's experiment, it's a lot of failing, it's a little bit of success, and it's try again. I'm not the first person to notice that you can't fix this with rules. There's no such thing as the way. There's only the way for each individual, his or her way. And that's what we want to see as viewers too. We don't want to see the images that other people have taken. We don't want to see you copying someone else. We want to see something unique that only you could see. I know as photo editor, I looked at a lot of images, and we all know from Facebook and Instagram and social media that when we see someone copying someone or someone photographing something that they don't really feel, the image just isn't as interesting. Editing your photos is really important, finding your best work, but also editing in the digital darkroom is meaningful for me because I'm accentuating what I like and de-emphasizing what I don't. I don't think it's cheating. Take lots of photos, connect with other photographers. I love how we look like we're very confused. Often we are. And keep it fun. And that's it. On to questions. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming out so late. I know it's sleepy time.
I think one thing that you're leaving out is printing. And it's something that I've just gotten into. Picked up a couple of, like I have a 17 and a 13-inch Canon printers, and
Great.
Seeing your work on paper just takes things to a different level. And working with exposure and the different papers and different sizes, it's really kind of reignited my whole love for photography.
Such a good comment. The physical object is so powerful in a way that screens never can be. And it's just satisfying to craft something yourself, right? Yeah, I've got the Canon ProGraph 13-inch. I love that. It's amazing what it can do.
Hi. I was just curious, in the beginning when you were showing kind of your body of work, you had that amazing picture of the lightning striking the water.
Yeah.
And you said you just got lucky. I mean, when you're sitting in a store and there's lightning, were you just looking at that little spot? I mean, when that lightning hit, do you just have a sense it was coming, or do you just have like this, I'm going to take a chance and have it on auto for like 15 seconds or something like that?
It's just one long exposure after another. And if I paused at all to like see what I got, sometimes I would miss a lightning bolt and I'd be like, oh gosh. So it's very monotonous. It's pointing the camera in the direction of the last strike. The time of day helped too, is the blue hours. So I can make these really long exposures, 15, 30 seconds. And in that time, any lightning bolt that strikes is going to be recorded. I don't have to like snap and catch a lightning bolt. I just leave the shutter open for long, long periods of time, and anything that happens in that time is captured. And yeah, just pointed in the direction that the last strike was. And I'm hiding, in my card too, being really safe. Thanks.
About 2/3 of the way through your presentation, there was the shot of the constellation at nighttime, and you said you walked out and set a timer on your camera.
Yes, sir.
How far away were you from the camera?
Probably 20 yards.
Oh, really?
But it looked a lot further because I'm photographing at 16 millimeters, which is a very, very wide angle. So it accentuates the distance. It looks like I am away. So I could have run out to get in that, but because I was taking one continuous frame after the other, one of the frames would have caught me out in that. And another benefit of having those continuous frames is I could then stack the images and reduce the noise, because noise is a pattern that is, never repeated. Whereas mountain is always there and I'm always there, so any noise is canceled when you stack them in Photoshop. So 2 benefits to that.
How do you go about sorting and filing the thousands of photos that you take?
I can show you. It's called Adobe Lightroom Classic. And I've got 170,000 photos in here. What do I do? How do I find those? Well, I keyword everything. If you look down here on the right, I have captions and keywords like enormous, epic, huge, landscape, light, Maine, massive, New England, nor'easter. So all these keywords allow me to search in the search bar and easily find any image. And then also have these collections, like some of the new work, the lobster boat aerials, anything that's gone into calendars, things that are in Archipelago right down the road, that has its own collection. So I love this program for organizing images. And the folders, you don't have to rename any of the folders like we used to do before. You might be doing that now, which is you name the folders based on their contents. The folders don't change their name. All the names live within the Lightroom program. So if I ever lost Lightroom, I would be out of luck, but I think it's going to be around forever.
Could you describe your workshops, how you run your workshops?
Yeah, they used to be 1 days on Fridays when I was doing it for Down East, but now they're usually 3 or 4 days, usually long weekends, Thursday to Sunday. And we photograph as a group, usually sunrise and sunset. We have most of our meals together. They can be really intense in June when the sunrise is at 4 a.m. and sunsets at 8:30, and really lovely in February when sunrise is at 7 and sunsets at 4. But we give you ample time to rest in the middle of the day in the summer. And we have classroom time where we, like this, go over images. A lot less of me talking, a lot more of sharing images from the group, talking about them, helping people improve on editing, helping people improve on selecting images that might work and might not. But all of the talk about criticism is very positive. There's no reason to, diss anyone's photo. It's self-expressive. It's like saying they're, competitive yoga. It's not really a thing.
All right, any other questions? Oh, yeah.
I was admiring the Katahdin picture, so that was this past winter, did you say that? And which trail had you gone up? I was trying to see your vantage point.
We start at Able Bridge. It's a 12.5-mile ski into Roaring Brook with 70 pounds of gear pulled on sleds, and then a 3-mile sludge from Roaring Brook to Chimney Pond. And that's like 2,000 feet of vertical with that 70 pounds of gear still. And then we go up Saddle usually in the winter to get to the peak. But a lot of the night, that was right at Chimney Pond, so didn't have to climb the mountain to get that shot. It's tough to get in there, and you have to apply for permits months in advance, so you never know what the weather's going to be. And even during the eclipse, the whole park's going to be closed, so no one can get in there. And it's right in the path too. I might actually try and photograph Katahdin from Mount Chase with the eclipse over it. We'll see if it's clear. Just the mid-range, 24 to 70. And it's close to how we see with the human eye. So a lot of those images are just like very simply, I'm trying to record what I'm seeing and feeling, not trying to be too clever. Getting in really close or zooming way back. But I do that sometimes too. But I think those middle ones are That's great range. It's an awesome lens. Great questions.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Deborah, for joining, and
Thanks,
thanks so
guys.
much to Benjamin again for joining us tonight. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.